terrible places. They're hot, intense. There are these people who have lands and fields and they grow their own gardens, and here they're living in these cramped quarters in a tent, where disease, for example, tuberculosis and other issues, where malnourishment was very prevalent, where it was highly politicized, where even foreign aid, humanitarian aid was politicized in a way where it wasn't always distributed equally and appropriately to people, where in order to receive food, one had to compromise various other things. So when I say when we can't feed ourselves, we're not dignified. We've lost our dignity. This is what I learned in Pakistan, in the refugee areas that I visited. Again, I didn't live there, but it was as close as possible to being there. And it didn't mean that my life was comfortable either. It was a dangerous place. It was Peshawar, specifically, is where we moved to, and many Afghans live there. It was a very dangerous place for Afghans. There was the brotherly, over-the-surface love of a neighbor who said, yes, we welcome you, come here, of course you are in trouble, so seek refuge here. There is on the surface that, but then beneath the surface there are so many other issues of capitalizing on that to so much more, which again, further details. But this is what I learned, and I realized that malnutrition became very prevalent. Where I saw pictures of children, there's as a skeleton, or women who are so malnourished that they look very aged and very tired, and their men are away at war. So here we are glorifying the war, but nothing glorious about it. It was absolutely awful. Here is the 10-year occupation of a foreign, of a superpower on a very poor country, on a very private country, on a very independent and very proud country, but also one that is not so developed. There's an innocence about this place as well. They're innocent. They're very wise people, absolutely, but there's an innocence as well. It's that pure way of thinking that's very simple. It's the basic things that all of a sudden that's under attack. And so this is really what I learned, experienced.
I don't want people to think that, I mean, the way you sounded, I think, is a little understated. I mean, many of your close family members were murdered by the various occupational forces and other things. And so I'm startled with your somewhat lack of, sort of anger and reaction. It must be very hard for you to kind of deal with this.
There are human emotions, and of course I'm angry, and of course I'm frustrated, and I will always be until the last day I live. This was unjust, it wasn't fair. I mourn the people, but I'm also hoping to conduct myself in a graceful way about it too, where I can now learn from that and see what can be done about it. I can't return my beloved grandfather. He's gone, and it wasn't right what happened to him. Or other members of my family, or my uncle, for example, who was brutally assassinated in front of his child. His young child was standing right there in front of him, and here's a mountain of a man who has inspired me in life. I've learned quite a bit about him. I've admired him. I knew him very little. I know more about him now than I did as a child. But he was in his 30s.
And he was working so hard, too.
And he was a genius. He was very brave. He was doing things in a very practical way. A medical doctor, saw malnourishment in refugee camps, especially of women and children, saw them as the most vulnerable people. Yes, all people are vulnerable in such an environment. The men were vulnerable in other ways. They were out to war and they were killed there. That's another vulnerability. But the people they left behind, what to do with them? Hundreds of thousands of them in these cramped places. What about these women where the traditional society, that the man is the head of the family, the breadwinner, so to speak, as we would know here, the person who goes is the public face. All of a sudden, that man is absent or permanently absent. it changes that whole structure, the family structure and the political structure, the societal structure. So all of a sudden then the woman has to take responsibility. How does she go about it? How does she take care of her children, her parents, her elderly parents in a tent and provide for them? We eat every day. I mean, my dear friends reminded me, please have a meal before your presentation, because for heaven's sake, and I did, and I'm grateful to that. It's not perfume, it can't be rationed. We need food every single day, and we need drinking water every single day as well. This was absent in the refugee camps. And in many ways, it's still absent in our communities in Afghanistan as well. And our projects address that.
I think we should let you all join in the conversation and ask questions, make comments, say what you will. Yes, sir.
Well, I'm wondering about different forces in your country.
Speak up a little, sir.
I'm wondering about different forces in your country that prevent your project and are really leading to the ultimate subjugation of Afghanistan. And that would be the Taliban, the central government, the subjugation of women. How those forces all combine to impede the progress. And I guess we have to say the occupation of American forces, what role that plays in your country in terms of progress, autonomy, prosperity. Any comments?
Absolutely, it's an obstacle, yes, but it can't undermine to that extent where we're sitting there paralyzed about it. It's a great deal to overcome, and there are very serious issues. How fantastic it would be to have a magic wand and just make that disappear. Then I would have the perfect working conditions, but that's not the case. And so all of these issues that you address now didn't appear in a vacuum. They didn't appear overnight. They have consequences into the future, and they have roots in the last 40 years, if not longer than that. It has issues that are pertinent to domestic issues, but also international intrigue and global issues as well. We have to keep in mind that Afghanistan for 10 years, during the last of the dying years of the Cold War, was really the center of the Cold War. And the Cold War, as we understand it so comfortably here, it's such an interesting term. As a political scientist, I don't care for it much. It was very hot for various people around the world. It wasn't waged in Moscow and in Washington, D.C., and I'm glad of that in that sort of a way, but the rest of the world paid for it in various ways. So these issues that you address, very legitimate, they have roots. And they're going to have roots, and they're going to evolve, and they're going to transform in various ways. Yet here is work that's very, very practical that needs to go on. I can't impress upon the importance of clean drinking water for a child. Malnourishment is very prevalent in Afghanistan even since 2001, and one would assume that hopefully that was something that was addressed very seriously or on the way to eradicate it by now. There's plenty of funding for it and other well-wishers and such. Yet malnourishment, most of the population, over 50% of the population, many of them children in the older generation, are malnourished from lack of food, but also malnourishment is from drinking contaminated water as well. A child before the age of 4 and 5 who has various episodes of diarrhea due to impure water is never going to be properly nourished, no matter how well they're fed, because their precious internal organs and their digestive system has already been destroyed.
But don't you think that these issues that I talked about, I think especially the government, the central government, which was quite corrupt, the occupying forces and the Taliban, they impact these children. They do affect malnourishment. Money is diverted from healthy programs. There are so many big issues that your country faces. I'm just wondering how they can begin to go beyond the present status. I mean, it's the longest war that America's been in. Afghanistan was invaded in 1984 by the Russians?
79.
79. and your country is just suffering just too much. How can it get help to move beyond this horrible impasse?
So I began with, I'm hopeful, the people are hopeful, so we from a distance, I would discourage us from lacking hope or dismissing it. From a distance, it's a very bleak picture. One is there and trying to survive on a daily basis. That is very important, that we survive on a daily basis, that we wake up in the morning and we do what is necessary to survive that day, not only for ourselves but for our others and for the future generation. And when I am participating in something that I don't see all of the results immediately or in my lifetime, yet I wake up every morning with a hope that I'm making a difference, that I, in collaboration with others, am working in harmony, and that the Taliban and the other groups that you just mentioned, they're there, yes, they're a reality, but what are we going to do? Just succumb? You see? Humans are resilient. We are geniuses. We are very creative thinkers. Samsurtya is revitalization of the environment in Pashto. I should have clarified that. But it means so much more than that as well. It's in addition to that, there's so much. It's revitalizing everything. If it's a clean drink of water to a child that hopefully is going to grow up healthy, to eating fruit from the tree, to sitting beneath the shade of a tree, to all of these other things, to the poultry distributions that we have of 10 chickens per household means a protein for the child that day. That's an immediate impact. All of these things are very, very meaningful. And there are people at various degrees that are participating in this. And so while there's one egg that's delivered to one child for one breakfast, I'm in business. and by business, you know what I mean, that it's good for me, it's good for others, and I'm willing to participate. And there are others as well. It's as bleak as it may seem, that's when we can be very creative as well, and that's when we can imagine. We have the opportunity and we have the skill and the knowledge to imagine a different way. It doesn't have to be this way. And I dream, and I dream very big. I'm a pragmatic person as well. I'm a political scientist. I know about the world quite a bit, the different sides. So, and yet, at the same time, knowing about the world also means that it's a cycle. As a student of history also, this is a cycle. It's not going to perpetuate in perpetuity. It's going to end. We know of other civilizations and other groups of people as well, and sometimes from the ashes we emerge far more stronger.
Let's have another question or a comment or a statement.
Of course, there's so much more. I only hope I've done justice to this great work. Yes, please.
When the refugees come back to the country,
Yes.
how did they prove that the land that they lived on, that they belong there?
Oh, well, this is such an
I mean, that's
amazing,
mind-boggling.
important question. It is mind-boggling, and it is very, very challenging. And the years, other militias might have come and just taken over their place, and there are people who actually will build on other people's homes, and they say, well, I have a gun now. You would like to take it away back for yourself? Let's see you do that. Very, very tragic. That's been known to happen. I know of one family, my friends actually, with 500 acres of land to the north of Kabul, and she has, for now more than 1 decade, out of one office to another office, to one in front of one judge to another judge. They've actually built a road on her property now, on her land, and houses, and a community of people have moved in there. There's that extreme side, and then others where maybe some member of the family lived there still. And in Afghanistan, we have lived in one place for hundreds of years, and everyone knows us there. So we return, and it's very credible of, yes, you're one of us, not from someplace else. You're not going to just settle this. Lots of complications. You can imagine.
I guess Mariam was sort of reinforcing what I have experienced with the Afghan people as being very proud people and very intelligent people. And I just want to share with you one experience that I heard from a Mennonite missionary who was part of the gathering from the Mennonite community of actually 6 lorries or 6 trucks of powdered milk and of wheat and sugar and the things to take to the refugee camps that had been set up in Afghanistan itself. And they got to the border of Tajikistan, and the local military force there said, "Oh, you can't bring those things in unless you pay a tariff."
Yes, unfortunate.
It's ridiculous.
Yes, here are the conditions, the working conditions, and yet here is food for the people. What is more important than that? But we see that aid can be politicized. That when vulnerable, when we rely on others, we are very, very vulnerable in that regard.
Well, there was a woman in the community there who recognized this as an issue, and so she met with the military leaders there, and she spent 6 hours with them. And in the course of that 6 hours, she not only had the tariff removed, but they were prepared, or they gave them a military escort.
Congratulations. Okay.
And I thought that Afghan women are going to survive.
They are.
All humans, it's not probably, I wouldn't want to claim it as an exclusively Afghan trait, but all humans, all living beings. In Afghanistan, I saw this. Someone asked me, there were roses in one of the photos, and I must comment on this, and I thank you for reminding me this. There were roses you saw covered in dust. Yes, but they're still roses, and they're beautiful fragrance as well. And you see that the earth around it is cracked and it's broken and it's dry. But here's a rose, such a precious flower emerging from that. Isn't that miraculous in many ways? And so, but also very manageable. It was through our efforts. It wasn't, I mean, it was work. And so when I want to note that all living beings are meant to be resilient and want to survive. It's what we do, whether it's a rose or us personally, or I saw a cat that used to visit me in Jalalabad in my family's courtyard. Every afternoon at 4:30, this precious cat, the neighborhood wandered around their neighborhood. I don't know how she found me. She would arrive and expecting a little treat. And of course, I always kept something for her. The first time I met her, I just looked at her face, and we recognize pain, especially if we're vulnerable to it, if we're sensitive about these things. I saw such pain on this cat and this strength as well. And I thought, I wonder what your story is if you could talk to me, what you would tell me. And she looked like she worked very hard to survive. Skinny little cat, beautiful in so many ways, strong, just stared at me and probably said, "Please, you Afghans are notorious for your hospitality. Give me something to eat." And, I would give her a treat. But then again, a reminder of, yes, you're a living being here and you want to survive. And I'm so grateful to have witnessed this, because it just reinforces that in the depths of despair, that's natural to have that despair, of course, as well. We need to be very hopeful, or then we end up in that depth of despair and never emerge from it.
I think it's interesting you talk about a female cat.
I assume, I don't know. When I talk about nature, I always say she, and I hope
think
no
you're
one takes
right. I think it was a
But the
female.
cat, I imagine, I don't know. I've had 2 beautiful cats, and one was male, one was female. I love them both equally, but I don't know this cat particularly. I didn't pay attention.
On that note, I think it's time to call this to an end, although I'm sure you'll stick around and talk to anybody who wants to talk to you directly. So thank you
Yes.
very much.
You're very welcome. I have some business cards, some contact information. We do have a website, rudimentary information, but I'm always available for questions or comments, presenting to other events as well. And I thank you so much for your patience with me this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.